We'd like to begin, before speaking, at the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras and Jagannath Subhadra, say our invocation prayers. Please, everyone together. Om Jnana Tirandasya Jnananjana Savakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manubhisham Shtavitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadandiyam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Which one of you want to speak first? So if we take this moment and we all try to be as present as possible for us, each and every one of us, to be as present as we can in this moment, and then zoom back into time 10, 20, 30, 40 years. We go to the day of the installation of Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras. Srila Prabhupada began this, observing this the night before the deities were installed. And the temple was still in progress, practically being finished. But Srila Prabhupada instructed there was this beautiful marble, as you know, you've heard the stories that were on the altar. And Srila Prabhupada instructed me to put candles on the altar. The lights were 1969 spotlights, and we had two of them, one that came from the right side of the front temple wall and one that came from the left side, and they shone down upon the marble where Sri Sri Londonishvara would tomorrow sit. And all the lights in the temple room were turned off, and white chrysanthemums were spread around the edge of the marble. And then right where Sri Sri Radha Londonishvara were to sit. And Srila Prabhupada brought us into the temple in the evening. We met there about 7 p.m. And we had the most beautiful kirtan with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada personally arranged for Sri Sri Radha Londonishvara. I don't know if it's been told in the Katha because I wasn't here all week, but it was quite an extraordinary time that Shyamasundara Prabhu had carved Lord Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balaram. And very early on, in the summer of that year, we had a program at the Hindu Center. And I saw my first Radha Krishna Archa-Vigraha in my life, along with many other deities of Archa-Vigraha that were in a circle like this around the room, in little altars around the room. And I fell in love with marble Archa-Vigraha. And I had it in my mind's eye that that's the kind of deities it would be really nice to have. Has this story been told? Hmm. So, I had it very strongly that this is what we should have. So, we knew people at the India High Commission. So we got permission to put little containers, cardboard containers with a slot. And it said, donation to the Radha Krishna Fund. And that was how we thought we would raise enough money for purchasing Archa-Vigraha. So we had them on all 3 floors, and every week or fortnight we would see how much was collected. And they were always small coins, 50p, small amounts. So after some really long time, we collected the massive sum of 42 pounds. And that seemed like a fortune for us. So one day, and I was in charge of the funds. So one day, Shyamasundara Prabhu came into me and he said, Yamuna, I need that money. Do you remember that? Oh, this is good. That's another thing, is that we all remember so differently, and we even remember I would love to sit with these other 5 devotees and speak for maybe months at a time. This keeps moving. To help each other to remember with clarity. Dhananjay remembers if it was raining out or someone's dhoti fell off, and I love someone who has that capacity to remember and record details. Anyway, one day he came to me and he said, I need that money. So I said, well, that's for the deities. You can't have that money. He said, no, the truck. The truck, something was like the engine fell out of the truck. A new carburetor. Did it cost 42 pounds for a carburetor? No, but whatever it was, he needed the money. So for me, it was like catastrophic that this would happen. So the money went, and as I was reading the letters before coming here again, I noticed that at the very late date of November 26, 1969, Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to Aniruddha asking for deities that had been carved by Gaurasundar in San Francisco in 1967. And those deities were very small. They were wood, carved in wood, and under 18 inches. And Krishna was painted marine blue, really no shading whatsoever. And Rani was painted cadmium yellow, very, very bright yellow. And he said, I want those, it was a footnote to his letter to him, and he said, I want those deities sent immediately by air freight. This is November 26th. We did not have deities. And the installation was scheduled for 14 December. So then the next letter that the deities are mentioned is 5th December. So it's between November 26th and 5th December that Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras were captured by Srila Prabhupada and meant to be installed in ISKCON London Yatra. So this is the night before, and devotees can remember selectively different things, and I recall this dark room with the candles twinkling on the altar, and the exhausted devotees, just half of their minds on an ocean of service that needed to be done for the next morning. But when Srila Prabhupada came in the temple, a flood of his presence entered the room, and we garlanded him with white chrysanthemums, and he sat there with a light over his head, and he picked up his kartals and he began chanting, and we all followed Prabhupada chanting, and that kirtan was one of many in my mind that are captured forever. I remember looking up at his eyes, and they were gray slits. You know how sometimes in Buddhist tradition they show eyes on the top of a shirt. So Prabhupada's eyes took on these oceanic qualities. And he looked down. I notice here some people look around at each other when they chant and see if everyone's grooving or whatever. But Srila Prabhupada, he looked at his disciples from the Vyasa on, and many disciples felt that, Srila Prabhupada didn't look at them, but through them. So he looked down with those gray eyes, and he just saw everything in the room. And then he chanted Hare Krishna. So it's often been told that Srila Prabhupada considered the most important thing in worshipping a deity the chanting of the holy name. Kali Yuga, it's very difficult to execute deity worship properly. So he watched us chanting Hare Krishna, and then we all closed our eyes and chanted Hare Krishna with him, and he took us to the spiritual world with kirtan that evening. So that was the beginning of the installation of Sri Sri Radha. And I believe that kirtan is today the beginning of this next year of service to their lordships. And no matter what the size of the temple, or our lacks, or our tremendous desire to serve the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada by following in the mood of his instructions. This has been brought up so many times this week as the ocean of nectar of this yatra, 40 years of this yatra have been churned, is Prabhupada's person, Prabhupada's mission, Prabhupada's qualities, and all of that is tendered at the lotus feet of Radha Londonishvaras. So for us to, I've really been thinking also, I'll say one more thing before I finish. So that was that night before, and it was very powerful, and the essence of it was the holy name and the presence of our founder Acharya. And his wishes for us to worship this transcendental Archa Vigraha, which later became known as Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras. And just one more thing, that I've thought that aside from churning the ocean of nectar, and aside from the wonderful Sangha that we've had, even though brief and perhaps not as long as we would all like, that we take this opportunity to really, each and every one of us, go inside, and everyone who's watching this or hearing this, that we all take the opportunity to go inside and before you take rest tonight, Srila Prabhupada gave the instruction at the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras that each devotee at the end of the day should come in front of the deity and report to the deity. Do you do that? No. Well, it's something you might think of doing or starting or rekindling from the old days. To go in front of the Lord and reveal your mind to the Lord, what service you did, what you'd like to do tomorrow, and make your service better. So we all did that. After the devotees came back from Sankirtan at night, we had prasadam together, and then everyone would go up to the temple to put, before their lordships took rest, and do that. So I was thinking that tonight each and every one of us could report in to Sri Radha Londonishvara and maybe make some report to him what you did in Krishna consciousness, what you tried to do in Krishna consciousness for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure, and then make some vow, some vrat that this is what I want to work on this next year in Radha Londonishvara service, or your Archa Vigraha service. Does that sound like a good idea? Yeah. Okay. So that's just an opening. Thank you. No problem. No need for coffee. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. In celebrating the arrival of Sri Radha Londonishvara, my role in the yatra took a shift, because up until that time we were more in a together mode, even if we were like sometimes not together due to our living. We came back in from Lenin's place, and once again there was a little shift in the mode, and because I had a smaller member of the party, Saraswati, and there was another small member, Jivananda, son of Draupadi and Devananda. We were both mothers and the children. It was decided we shouldn't live in the temple because it might be a disturbance. So we were living a few blocks away in a basement type of bed and breakfast. And we'd take turns coming to do service. One would come and do service, and the other would stay and mind the other child. So in that respect, I didn't have a close association with the deities. I certainly never was like a pujari in those days, because it wasn't considered proper for mothers with children to do deity seva. But the service was mostly to the devotees by going down in that kitchen that we had and cooking. And that was something that was very special. Cooking was always a challenge because we never knew what ingredients we might have. And when the deities came, it became a little tighter because we had to have very special ingredients for them. And that was wonderful, that the best would go to them. That mood was definitely prevalent and appreciated by the devotees. And Mahaprasad was definitely honored. It was really sacred. It was something you felt really privileged to get even a speck of. I mean, sometimes I see nowadays kind of Mahaprasad gets kind of discarded sometimes, but it was really something you'd line up for, especially for the Mahaprasada Shri Radha Londonishvara. We were speaking the other night, the four of us, and during that discussion we brought up and glorified and remembered His Holiness Mukunda Maharaj, one of the members who wasn't present, and Her Grace Janaki Devi Dasi. And I wanted to bring up the other member that isn't present, just baby Saraswati, who was part of the yatra. Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter to Jaya Govinda in February of 1968 that in the service of the Lord there is no distinction between caste, creed, color, or sex. And this was something we certainly, as a early devotees, we felt there was no distinction. And we were equally welcome to take part in devotional activities. And as such, Saraswati was one of the members of the yatra, and she had her own little world and her own little set of activities. And she definitely had her own relationship with Srila Prabhupada that was distinct from being my daughter or Shyamasundara's daughter. Prior to coming here to the United Kingdom, we had stopped in Montreal. And we stopped in Montreal because His Divine Grace was there, and we wanted to take His blessings before taking this big step across the ocean. We wanted to make sure we'd be successful, and putting our head at His lotus feet was the best way we could imagine doing that. And there was also a sense of, just like I had told the story, how He left us and went to India, and there was some trepidation that He might not return, we might not see Him again. We were now going, and there was some trepidation, some unspoken thought that we might not see Him again. We were leaving, and we didn't know where our journey or path would take us. So we were very much eager to meet Him. And we were told that if you touch the lotus feet of the spiritual master, the sins of 10,000 lifetimes would be removed. We weren't told that you were dumping those sins on His lotus feet. That part wasn't told to us. We also knew, we had seen, there weren't so many Indians in America at that time, and we had seen those who would approach Swamiji, Srila Prabhupada, try to touch his feet, and sometimes it was permitted and sometimes not. But we certainly never attempted that because we could sense that it wasn't something that he was pleased with. But on this occasion, feeling that we needed to be really prepared in whatever way we could be prepared for this mission, coming here as we were with just so little to hand out in one respect. I mean, we didn't have literature or other media. We decided to ask if we could have permission to touch his feet. And that permission was actually granted. So that was an anticipation in terms of seeing him. Let's kind of skipped ahead because when we first landed, we were so anxious to see him that myself and Janaki immediately changed clothes and we decided to go search for where he was staying. The temple in Montreal was an old bowling alley, and it had only one small bathroom and a little tiny walk-through kitchen. So they had some accommodation nearby for Srila Prabhupada. We didn't know where it was, but we were definitely convinced if we just went out and ran around the street, we would find it. And the reason I was sure we could find it was because I knew we'd seen some orange cloth hanging out somewhere. Because that was what would happen. His servant would watch his cloth and hang it out somewhere. So I just knew if we ran around the neighborhood, we'd find it. And we certainly did. And we were, heart pumping, just really excited. Myself and Janaki went, and Govinda Dasi and Gaurasundar were his servants, and Govinda Dasi was there and immediately announced to Srila Prabhupada that we had come, who immediately indicated we should come in. So I was holding my small daughter, who was 6 weeks old at the time, and Janaki and I both entered, but I came first, and he looked up, he said, "Oh, this very morning I had a dream about this very child." And he said, "Yes, this very child, I dreamt about her this morning." And I was kind of I was stunned from suddenly there he was, we were face to face with him, and then he said that, and I didn't occur to me even to say, "What did you dream?"
But the fact that he said that indicated that he knew my daughter. That's what it indicated to me. And had he wanted to say more, I'm sure he would have. So that was one indication of her relationship. So then when we were departing and we came to that point, we came to his room. It was the day after. First there was Janmashtami, and then there was his appearance day ceremonies, which we celebrated. And in fact, during the appearance day celebration, we were all in that temple room. Devotees came from far and wide. And they brought his great, big, gigantic tully full of various preparations. And he took a gulab jamun and bit into it. And then he motioned to me to come forward. And he gave me that gulab. I was kind of front row. And he gave me this gulab jamun, and he indicated it was for my daughter. And my foolish mind thought, well, she's only 6 weeks old. She can only take milk, you know. But then I kind of like got back on track there and realized, you know, that she could certainly suck on this gulab jamun, which was made of dried milk. And so I put it by her mouth right where his lips had been, and she immediately began sucking. So that was actually her first Mahaprasadam. And again, indicating, because he called me, but indicated this was for her, you know, that they had a relationship. So then the next day, when we're departing, we went into the little quarters, and one by one went forward. They moved aside his little desk, and he stretched out his lotus feet. And one by one, we each came and put, at least myself, I didn't put my hands in his lotus feet, I put my head on his lotus feet, and I think probably each one did more or less the same.
I put my lips on his lotus feet. Sorry about that.
I wasn't like down and watching her. But when our heads went down, he took his hand and he was rubbing the back of our heads individually. And you're always told that, you know, you're not going to be enlightened by the Guru zapping you or, you know, doing something. But truly, when he rubbed the back of our heads, it was, you know, there was some electricity going on. And I understood that whatever was going to happen, we were going off into the wild blue yonder, to the unknown. But somehow we were going to be successful in this mission to serve him in the United Kingdom. And I felt that that was, you know, happening. They talk about empowerment. We were getting the empowerment. Then we went through that, and then the desk was put back. He was smiling. He looked at me, and he went like this. He asked me to hand him the baby. So I handed him the baby, and he's holding her she was facing out, he was facing out, and he took his garland and flipped it over both of them. And he smiled, and he says, now they will say, what kind of sannyas is he? And he was referring to his godbrothers, who he was, had mentioned, yes, my godbrothers had went to London. They were sannyasis and they failed. But I am sending grihastas. So now he made this little quip, and they'll say, what kind of sannyas is he? So then, again, this very sweet and intimate relationship that was between them. It wasn't, you know, from the mother, it wasn't from the father. I will tell just two other ones. They happened here in the United Kingdom. And again, they were indicative of his sweetness and his attention to his little disciple. So we were at the Lennon estate. Both of these pastimes took place there. And Yamuna had explained how we had different activities, and mine was quite often in the morning cooking breakfast prasadam. So the morning walk would be going by, and we had these Dutch doors on the little apartments where we were, and it opened the top door so we could see. But Saraswati was small. She couldn't see over the door. But she could understand that Prabhupada was coming on the walk. And somehow she got that door open and ran out, and she grabbed his hand. So I was in a quandary because I couldn't touch Prabhupada to pull her away, and she wasn't, as Prabhupada's he looked at her and said, "You're not dressed properly." And she didn't have an overcoat or her wellies on. So Prabhupada kind of nodded to me, which meant go get those things, which I did. And when I tried to put them on her, she still wouldn't let go of Prabhupada's hand. So I had to put one hand, and then she went like this and let go of the other hand, because she was afraid maybe perhaps I would take her away. And then she went off on the morning walk without her mother. Yamuna, I asked her if she remembered this, but she was doing the arti, so she wasn't so much aware of what was going on. But Yamuna would often do the arti because she was being instructed in deity worship by Srila Prabhupada, and he had his small deities in the upstairs room where he stayed. And as was mentioned also, my daughter had complete freedom and access. She didn't need an appointment to see Srila Prabhupada. So the arti was going on, and she was in the room. Yamuna offered the flower, and she gave it to Srila Prabhupada. And for some reason, at that at that exact time, my daughter decided to leave the room. And she was marching out, and Srila Prabhupada took the flower and he threw it at her and it hit her on the back of the head. And so Saraswati wheeled around, picked up the flower, and holding her little arm straight out, she marched straight back to Srila Prabhupada and she popped it in his mouth. So this became the second issue. This was the second issue that was troubling the mind of his servant, not Prajuna, Purushottam. The first one was, I told the other day, when we watched the moon landing, and Prabhupada said they did not go, so that troubled his mind. This little joyful incident between Srila Prabhupada and his small disciple, Saraswati, really troubled his mind. And it was one of the causes of his departure. And Srila Prabhupada, sometime later, in a letter to Gargamuni, actually acknowledged this, saying how unfortunate he had this mindset. He couldn't understand the behavior. Prabhupada didn't say this, but what he was indicating, he couldn't understand the behavior of a pure devotee. So there was many other wonderful exchanges between them. But one exchange occurred that they were not physically present. And that exchange was when I went to Srila Prabhupada in Juhu and asked him if he would initiate her. She was in America, she was at the Gurukul. But I had come to the conclusion that I wasn't fit to be a parent in terms of, you have to be able to deliver your offspring to make them fit to go back to Godhead, and I saw in myself a complete inability to do this. So I thought the only way I might be successful is if Srila Prabhupada would initiate her. So I went to him and I asked him. There was a darshan, everybody left, and I was still there, sitting on the corner of the roof, and he called me forward. And you want to speak? And I said, yes. And I said, will you initiate Saraswati? I gave my reason. So his answer was rather interesting. The first answer, he said, they are already initiated. Again, I didn't have the presence of mind to ask, what do you mean? I was just on my mission to get my daughter initiated, so I said, yes, but will you initiate her? So he said, bring me beads, which I had, and I handed him the beads, and I sat, and he chanted on the beads. Then he handed them back to me, and he said, and her name will be Miss Saraswati Devi, which it already was, but now it was formalized by the initiation. And he said she may sit in on the next fire yajna. So in this way, she became not only his she was his disciple, but she became his disciple. And I still have great hope for her that because of this connection, that maybe one day she will be here also greeting all of you. So before I close, I would just like to apologize to my godbrothers and godsisters who are here, because we are sitting here once again, and you are sitting there. And again, it is most of you. I'm looking at Bala Gopala and so many others who we lit a match and started a fire, left the room, and you stayed behind. And all of this is here because of what all of you have done. What to speak of all the grand disciples, who some of you have served, more years here than I was ever here. So it puts me in some awkward feeling in my heart, but I'm very grateful to all of you, and I beg your forgiveness that I'm sitting here. Hare Krishna.
As you were saying, Yamuna, about the different points of view about all these stories, how we each remember a wonderful incident, but from a different point of view, it gives it so much more flavor. I remember now you're talking about the night before the inauguration of the deity's installation. From my point of view, I was very envious of you who were able to sit out in the temple room and chant with Srila Prabhupada and get ready for the great event. At that time, I was behind the curtain. We still didn't have an altar built. This is the night before the installation. There was no altar. The other girls and so on were busy making clothes and getting the deities ready, and there was no altar to put them on. I had purchased a couple of antique columns, 4 antique columns, and some other bits of wood to build an altar, but there was no time to drill holes in the marble and anchor everything and construct the framework of the pagoda or the altar. So I was just sitting, working back there as quiet as I could, hoping you guys would leave so I could make some noise. And carry on and build this altar. And finally, as a last resort, we just set the columns there and laid the wood over the top of them, hoping the whole thing would hold up. And then I collapsed. Like you said, we were so exhausted. I was a youth, 25, 6 years old, with lots of energy, but for 2 days we had been working day and night to finish. And at one point, as I started to walk out behind the curtain, I collapsed and went unconscious. I woke up about 18, 20 hours later in my room upstairs. I missed the whole thing. The whole fruit of my labor was lost. And found. I wanted to be there so much for that initiation, for that installation. And then I heard, now Gurudas got another point of view because he was backstage supporting the whole framework when it collapsed. He and Prabhupada were holding it all up so the deities wouldn't get smashed. But so when I did finally wake up, I was so guilty. I felt so guilty. And I went down to Srila Prabhupada's room. And after bowing, I stood up and said, Prabhupada, I'm so sorry that I was not there and that the altar collapsed and all my work has failed. And he laughed. Don't worry about it. He said, Radha and Krishna did not want an altar over their head anyway. So from that day on, it was just the Jagannath deities above Radha and Krishna all together in one enclosure. But I was trying to think of a story that would best illustrate Srila Prabhupada's power and his essence that had to do with London. And this is very much a London story, although it didn't take place here altogether. But many times when we were sitting in Prabhupada's room at Berry Place, he would start talking about, people would come in with news clips. Everyone wanted to tell, because Prabhupada didn't read newspapers or anything, it was always a good opening to get in a conversation with Prabhupada by telling him what was going on that day in the news. Oh, today the Russians have done this, the Cuban crisis, or whatever. So, but whenever someone would do this, Prabhupada would say, you know, I want to go behind the Iron Curtain. I want to go to Russia. And several times there were some German devotees who would come from Germany and visit with him, like Hansaduta, Krishnadas, and others who were in Germany. And as in those days it was always thought that Germany was kind of the Berlin through the wall. That's how you entered the Iron Curtain, as you went through Germany. So Prabhupada was always, at many occasions, was requesting these German disciples to get him a visa to go there. And when they would come back after 1 or 2 months, they'd say, have you got my visa yet? No, we're still trying, Prabhupada. So Krishnadas, on his own, found out the name of a man in Moscow who was the head of the Oriental Studies Department in the academy there in Moscow. So he began writing him letters telling him about Prabhupada. And lo and behold, one day a letter came from this professor saying, oh, whenever you are in Moscow, please come and see me. So that was the only contact we had behind the Iron Curtain. Prabhupada was very anxious to go there, time after time. Well, everything got delayed, one thing and another. We all went to India. A year or so passed, and we were in Mumbai, in the first temple on, was it Warden Road? 7 Akash Ganga was the name of our little temple there, in this building on Warden Road, I believe it's called. And Prabhupada had freshly arrived. I think that was after the Cross Maidan Pandal. And one devotee came, Hansaduta came from Germany. Prabhupada asked him, we were sitting in this room, and he said, have you got my visa to Russia yet? And Hansaduta said, no, he's trying this and that difficulty. And Prabhupada was a little upset. He said, well, it has been 3 years now. Still there is no visa? And he turned to me and said, Shyamasundara, can you get me visa to Russia? And I said, I'll try, Srila Prabhupada. I don't know. That was just another thing, maybe. I was talking about magic last night. You just do it and see what happens. So I went to the Russian embassy, and by the end of that day, we had visas, including 2 Americans. Americans were forbidden behind the Iron Curtain. To this day, I don't know how they gave us that visa. And but it was the trick was it was for 5 days only, and you had to go within 48 hours of visa. So I came running back to Prabhupada. He said, "Did you get the visa?" I said, "Yes, Prabhupada. Here, passports, we can go." So within hours, we were on a plane to Moscow. 5 days, and he said, "You will come with me." So we had no plan, only this one invitation from this Professor Kotovsky. So upon arrival, there's so many stories to tell about Russia, but to make it short, on arrival, I called up or somehow contacted the university in Kotovsky, and he said, yes, come by tomorrow at such and such a day. We only had 5 days. So first day went by, just getting settled in. Second day we went to see Professor Kotovsky. And the reason that you can read his conversation, Kotovsky's conversation with Prabhupada. So I snuck it in there, and there was no question of saying, can I record this, because it was forbidden, anything like that. So I snuck it took it out of my bead bag and put it under the table and held it with my hand the whole time that he was talking. So anyway, second day goes by, there's nothing to do now. It's 3 days have passed. 2 days have passed out of 5. There's still nothing to do. Now our mission is done. The only contact we had was Kotovsky. The conversation has been successfully recorded for posterity. That's it. Third day, I said, Prabhupada, what should we do? Should we go sightseeing? He said, yes, let us go sightseeing. So the hotel arranged, we went on a bus with a bunch of other tourists, mostly from Iron Curtain type countries. We were the only Americans, and he was the only Indian. And we went to this place and that place. And all along the route, Prabhupada would make comments. Especially I pointed out a big church to him and showed him the guards in front of the door to the church, that no one was allowed in there. And so on. And we passed many soldiers and tanks and armor, and it was all so boring. But Prabhupada was making different comments about everything we saw. Finally, we got way out of Moscow to this the Stalin University, or whatever it's called, this huge Marx University. And it was a vast cement structure, and of course the guide said, it was all bubbling, what a wonderful thing this was to see. And Prabhupada was just bored to death. He says, can we get out of here? Can we leave? So I called a taxi and we just jumped in. It's totally forbidden. You're supposed to report every mood you made it in those days. If I wanted to go across Moscow, I had to get official permission to do so. But we jumped into a taxi back to the hotel. And we got to the hotel, I realized we had no money. No dollars, anything, what to speak of rubles. And the driver didn't speak any English. I said, no money. And he turned around and looked at us, and I could tell that he had seen Prabhupada as a holy man, that he was a saint of some kind. He didn't know what kind, but he said, all right. And in those days, you know, the drivers, nobody made any money. I mean, this was a lot of money for him to just give up like that. He was probably half starving. So the third day went by. There's only 2 days left in our entire trip. So I realized then I needed to get some money. I took some dollars from Srila Prabhupada and went down to the bank. This is the third day, late afternoon. And two boys approached me as I entered the bank and said, you want to change some rubles on the black market? You got some dollars? And I said, no, yeah, I better not. The rate is much lower in the bank, but I'm a little afraid we might get in trouble. So I did that and came out, and they were still standing there. One was an Indian boy. So we started talking, and his friend, the Russian friend, the young man with him, spoke English also. So we started talking, and I told him about Prabhupada. He asked me also, he said, do you have any jeans to sell? No, we don't wear jeans. Then he said, do you have any Beatles records? No, we don't have any Beatles records, but we're friends with the Beatles. Wow! And my spiritual master is was the spiritual master of the Beatles. He's here in Moscow. So immediately they wanted to see me. And I brought them up then on that night. This is the third night we were there. And Srila Prabhupada was just, he lit up like a light bulb when this Russian boy came in to see him. And something special happened over the next 2 days that there's no way to describe. Srila Prabhupada planted Krishna consciousness in this boy in the most powerful way I've ever saw him. In all the years I saw him in action, the most powerful, condensed period of his existence with us. He taught this boy, he immediately changed this boy into an almost atheist, communist student into a Krishna conscious devotee, to the point where the boy slept on the floor in my room that night and could hardly wait to get up and to hear some more the next morning. And in that way, in 2 days, he lived and ate and slept with us and just listened to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada had him reciting prayers. He showed him how to prepare prasadam. He taught him the essence of what preparing prasadam is, that it's offered to Krishna first. The only book we had was Malati snuck. Before we left, we were told we cannot bring any books of any kind. And Malati, in her usual manner, snuck a Bhagavad Gita into my suitcase. That's a funny story too. At the customs coming in, you had a lot of photos and loose mementos and things stuck in the pages of that Bhagavad Gita. And the KGB, when they opened our suitcase at the airport, they pulled some clothes up, and this Bhagavad Gita came flying out of the suitcase. And I thought, oh God, it's over. Where did Malati? And all the photos and loose things in the Bhagavad Gita went flying everywhere. And the KGB guy was so flustered that he had made a mistake of some kind that he spent all of his attention picking up all these things and shoving them back in the suitcase just to get us out of there. So the first Bhagavad Gita into Russia, as it is, was Malati's contribution. Anyway, Prabhupada asked me to give the Bhagavad Gita to this boy, and he took it. And then, so Prabhupada walked him through Bhagavad Gita, almost page by page, for 2 days, 2 nights, hammered it. And this boy was such an adept student. He just grasped the essence immediately and asked the right questions to get the answers he needed. So that at the end of 2 days, and we even had time the next day, Prabhupada, I had told Prabhupada about this Russian writer who was very popular at the time, named Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who had written a very popular book in America about life in Russia. And I had asked this boy if he could find him out, and we would go meet him. And this boy said, I know where he lives. All the artists and writers in Russia live in this one compound outside of Moscow, some distance, where they can be watched by the KGB. There was a big fence around the whole compound. They each all individually had homes in there, but they were under the eye of the state, so they could be monitored. So without permission, again, from any authority, I hopped on a train with him that 4th day afternoon, and we went out some distance on a train and when we went through the gates in there, I pretended that I was from India, so they let me in, because India in those days, Indira Gandhi and the Russians were kind of cozy, so they thought I was Indian. They let me in, and we walked down all these streets asking people where they lived, and pretty soon we came to Alexander Solzhenitsyn's house, and we knocked on the door. His wife came to the door, but she was very afraid. Oh, she was trembling. We said that he asked her in Russian language if we could meet her husband. She said, well, he's in jail. They took him away to jail a few days ago. He was writing in an unauthorized way in a wood storage house behind their house, where you store firewood. He had a little desk in there. And he was writing. They discovered him and busted him, took him to jail. But just at that moment, this guy walked up, who apparently inhabited the same house. They shared a house, named Rostropovich, who was a famous celloist. He was the best celloist in Russia. And his wife was a famous ballerina. And I had the only other little book, the book that I brought, I decided to sneak a book in too. Because it was the smallest book we had. It was only about that thick, and it was very small, called Easy Journey to Other Planets. So I did have another book. But I knew it was not something that, this boy had the Bhagavad Gita, so I had this book, and I thought I said, I want to give this book to Alexander Solzhenitsyn. To my knowledge, Rostropovich did give him that book. So another great personality in Russia was touched during this short period also. But going back, I mean, if you see Srila Prabhupada's potency in preaching, to point out or isolate this one incident is very graphic for us, because it proves beyond doubt the strength of Krishna conscious message, that it cannot be something so mundane and easily obtained. This boy was selected by Krishna, God knows how many births, to receive this. And such an amazing thing has evolved through the years. There's so many wonderful stories. I've met some of the Russian boys and girls here over the last few days, and I see how intimately this was all tied to London. It was Prabhupada's Prabhupada used London as his jump-off point for the rest of the world, basically. Even for India, the whole India yatra is all from London. It all came from London. You're at the epicenter. You must always keep it this way, that it must be a place where you all prepare and go out from here to other places and take the rest of the world by storm. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Ananta Shanti was his name. Prabhupada initiated him also. Yeah, I think I gave him my beads. And before leaving there, Ananta Shanti, well, the Indian boy who was with him when his father was the ambassador, I believe, the ambassador from India. So he agreed, Prabhupada requested him, because he could speak to the Indian boy directly. He says, I want you to bring in books and look after this Russian devotee. So he got his father to bring in books through the diplomatic pouch. That's how powerful this whole thing happened. It all happened in 2 days. And then he said before we left, he said, well, you know, Swamiji, before I can really get some freedom here, I'll need to have a foreign wife. So on the way, we flew from here, I think, to Paris and then to London. But he asked me on the plane if there was anyone in mind that I could think of that would be a suitable wife for this boy. And even though I thought about Mondokini, I thought I'd better ask Malati what she thought. When we arrived in London, one of the first things Prabhupada did is call for Mondokini and just proposed to her right there. He said, will you go to Russia and marry this boy? She said, oh yes, Prabhupada.
Some years ago in Bombay, we all gathered to talk about how we made some contribution to the opening of the Juhu temple. And it was like each one was a piece of the puzzle. All maybe senior devotees were there, and they told their stories, and what was so nice, they left their individual egos at the door. They were simply Prabhupada's children, and we heard the stories, and I didn't know that. Oh, you did that? Isn't that wonderful? And that's what was happening here. We were going out, Harinam, 3 times a day. And even though we were together, it was true. Shyamasundara was carving, and Yamuna was getting the whole Archavigraha deity program together, and I was going out on Harinam and also inviting dignitaries and BBC and all of that kind of thing. High Commissioner, get the guest list together. Prabhupada wanted to see who was coming, and he was very happy with some of the invitees. And so each one of us is like a piece of the puzzle. And we were doing different things, one and different simultaneously. We were together, but we were doing different things. But when Radha Londonishvara came into our midst, it was like the second part, the preaching and the deity worship. Prabhupada is the center of our lives, yet sometimes Prabhupada would go to Russia. So he, in every temple, installed a center of our lives that will be there when he's not there. And I remember the focus of the temple that came, and they came in our midst. So beautiful. Now, in the past days, I've been telling a lot of humorous stories, a lot of levity, because Prabhupada has a lot of levity. It's full. Prabhupada is always forgiving us with his sense of humor. For instance, we talked about touching his lotus feet. One time we were in some place in India. I was sitting right by Prabhupada because that's what I like to do, sitting right by Prabhupada. He never kicked me out. Sometimes other people wanted to, but he never did. And people were bringing Prabhupada gifts and touching his feet. And I knew of this idea of people putting their sins on a powerful guru. And this happens. But Prabhupada let this happen. And he turns to me as people are giving him gifts, and he says, just see how they're treating saintly people. So he was categorizing himself like that, rather than just see how they're treating me. And then he got into one of his levity moods, and he said, as they are touching my feet, and I may be absorbing their sins, I pat them back on the head and give it to them back. So because Prabhupada, he sees in each and every one of us our talents, and so because I have a sense of humor, he would encourage that. He would like to see me so he can test out his sense of humor. And he said that someone without a sense of humor is not Krishna conscious. It is part of the process. However, and he did it all the time. However, I've been purposely doing that in these days because I want you to realize that Krishna consciousness is a great adventure. And as we institutionalize anything, it happened in so many movements and organizations I've seen, people become comfortable, they have their titles, they have their positions, they go along, they don't have to think anymore. The rent is paid except one person, the temple president, usually has to worry about that, and all the other devotees don't. I experienced that as one of the many temple presidents. So I've purposely shared with you Prabhupada's sense of humor, his sense of levity, because I want you to feel that Krishna consciousness is a Navayovana, an ever-fresh process, every day, every moment. I don't want you to get jaded. And some people have said, you know, I want to preach here, but the administration may not like it, and you may not be empowered. And I said, how do you know you're not empowered? Each of us have a unique and individual relationship with Krishna. Achinta Veda Veda Tattva. That's one of the beautiful things about personalism. What separates us from other fundamental groups is personalism. We have this personal relationship. And so, I've done this to encourage you to find this humor, find this adventure, find this boldness, to carry this on. But as we make progress, we're tested. It happened in San Francisco. It happened on the boat over to Srila Prabhupada. He had a stroke. He was making progress. It happened in San Francisco. Another setback. It shocked us. Our father was out of our midst, and he may never come back. What are we to do? And then he instilled, I may die at any moment. Carry this on. And then I realized we were a movement. We weren't just with the Swami being spoon-fed and taught how to cook. And here's this new prayer on the black slate. And here's this, and you could do that. And you can, why are you photographing me when people are chanting? Photograph them. That is more important. He was referring to himself as if he was a piece of furniture, not important, so humble. All these things. And when he had that setback in San Francisco, he wrote me a letter that this is Maya's test because we're making progress. And so, yes, it is so much fun, but sometimes setbacks happen. The Rath yacht came crashing down after we pushed it all the way from Balaam, and then a block later, you know. Are we attached? No, we're not attached to the fruits of our actions. And that's what all the humor is. Smuggling books and doing something deviating from the norm. That's the miracle is defined as deviating from the norm. And some people have asked me about preaching a lot lately, and this is not a shlok, and I don't want you to necessarily follow it, but sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness and permission. And so we did these zany things. I mean to say, people are saying, oh, well, now it's taking 2 years to get initiation, and it's becoming... Yes. So, I'm encouraging them to just persevere, but we have to use our imagination for preaching, and you know, we can say this person isn't this or this person isn't that, but maybe down the road we might not be this or that. So, you know, instead of putting them on the defense, it's better to encourage them. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, that some people may fall away, but instead of making them feel bad, we want to welcome them back, understand. So as we make this progress, Krishna will test us sometimes. And that's what happened here. We were all doing our different duties, and I was back in the temple. I didn't go to the Hindu center with Prabhupada, and they went off in the Krishna van, And they came back with Londonishvaras. And suddenly, we had the other wonderful balance. The preaching and worship of the deity in the temple. Now, it felt wonderful. And what beauty. What beauty. Frankly, I have to admit, and I was in Vrindavan for many years, but this really is my favorite yatra. It's because you're so nice and smart and gentlemen and ladies, and you do things well. And it is what Prabhupada wanted. This is the launching pad, the center of the universe, the center of this planet. And so, the reason I also, scientifically speaking, the reason it is one of my favorite yatras is because in San Francisco, we planted the seeds and left to go here. Here, we planted the seeds and I stuck around. Usually, Shyamasundara built the floor, but he didn't mop the floor. What I meant that we were usually pioneers, and when the floor was built, we left. He might have mopped the floor. I know he doesn't do windows, but So here we got a chance to see some of the glorious things happening. We stuck around for a while. Even in Vrindavan, I helped build that temple, but then when it was built, it was sent away again. So this is my favorite because I got to experience some of the seeds growing that we planted. I saw it. And so on my altar at home, and I could have Vrindavan, but I have Radha Londonishvaras. I do, because they're so beautiful. So really beautiful. And so here we are. They come back from the Hindu Center in the Krishna van, and Prabhupada comes in with Radha Londonishvara, and we're setting up, and then you know the story. But then again, Krishna's test. That Prabhupada and I are behind the altar, and it starts to crash down in the middle of the installation. All the dignitaries are out there. The fire yug is going on. The smoke billowing everywhere. High commissioners, MPs, BBC. They don't know what's happening, but I was holding one end up, and Prabhupada was holding the other, and he was like a lion holding this up so strong. His eyes blazing, holding it up. We were personified pillars. So then I needed somebody strong to help. Dhananjaya, please come and help. I go like that. There's a hand coming out of the altar. Dhananjaya comes and helps. Okay, who else is strong? Well, Tommy Gun. Tamal's strong. Come on. That was my nickname for Tamal, Tommy Gun. So they helped. And then somehow or other, we righted it, because Shyamasundara didn't have time to put nails in it. And so yeah, the levity is there because it's such a wonderful process, and it isn't We don't want to be jaded. We don't want to be comfortable. We want to be bold. We want to be innovative. We want to say, maybe we can meet Solzhenitsyn and just go to that compound. You know, just go there. Go crash Ravi Shankar's party at the High Commissioner. You know, we can only just get thrown out. So that was a great test again. And I realized that sometimes Krishna consciousness is like that. You have to be ready to take care of things that may attack us. And so Shyamasundara built that beautiful temple with redwood that he visionarily knew we would put someplace in London. Who brings a bunch of redwood on a ship? Because we might get a place someplace, in a place we don't know and we don't know anything. I mean, if that's not deviating from the norm, I don't know. And when I went to Russia, who smuggles books under pots and pans, like we're campers? I mean, we just do whatever. And so, Shyamasundara built the temple for London, Radha Londonishvaras, that looks like an upside-down ship. And now, 40 years, look what's happened. The seed has grown into all of you, many places, and this place is wonderful. Usually, we needed to go to a new place because there were too many new devotees coming. That was the criteria why we needed Bhaktivedanta Manor. That's the criteria when the 35 sleeping bags came from behind the door in Bury Place. Now there's 35 sleeping people. And this is getting crowded, so we need another place. And so from the upside down ship, now we're in a ship that's right-sided. This looks like a ship. We could be in a ship right here. It looks like a ship. And so together, helping one another, caring for one another, inspiring one another, we can sail to the spiritual sky, back to Godhead together. Any questions? Do you want to address them to any specific person, or?
Well, either yourself or Shyamasundara, or anyone who knows the answer, really.
Okay, well, it's me now.
Okay. We have heard so many wonderful things about the installation of Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras, and this has been extremely extraordinary. But can you tell us something of how Lord Jagannath, Lord Balaram and Lady Subhadra appeared here in London, please?
Well, because this precedent was set in San Francisco, and the master carver of that, San Francisco, LA, and New York, and Shyamasundara had something to do with that, this continued, and in Betterton Street, in a cold water warehouse, one of the things Shyamasundara was doing was carving the deed. He said, actually, he should answer this, because when he tells the story to, like, Radhanath Maharaj last night, it was like, well, we got these timbers from the barge people because we needed this big piece of wood that didn't have any knots in it. He sounds like a carpenter, right? He's like, you know, and he's just talking like a craftsmen. And so we only had 2 floors. Michael X, the black Muslims on the top floor, and Malati is sleeping on the box on the bottom floor. We were supposed to have 2 floors, but you know, garage. And so Shyamasundara carved them at Betterton Street, again, seeing the future. And you know, when and if he comes back, he might want to elaborate some more about it. And maybe you want to elaborate something. Sakshi Gopal?
Hare Krishna. There was something that Yamuna mentioned, spoke about the deities. When you said when you first started worshipping these beautiful Archavigraha, who became known as Sri Radha Londonishvaras, at what point were they known as Sri Radha Londonishvaras? And what were they known before?
I have a feeling Dhananjaya might be able to answer that question better. There's photographs and it's documented that it was known as the Radha Krishna Temple in the very beginning. So I'm not positive. Can you answer that, Dhananjayaji? Yes. I don't want to be inaccurate.
I don't want to be inaccurate either.
No.
I'll go along with what you're saying.
Hare Krishna.
In fact, if you recall, I did ask you, I sent you an email asking that same question that Sashi Gopal was asking.
It's wonderful for devotees to cross-check, you know, if they can't remember exactly. And I really can't, because my years of Radha Londonishvara when I was Grihastha then was really just from December 14th when the deities were installed, and then we left for India just not even a year later. I was engaged in their service, and there's certainly nothing in the letters about that name. Prabhupada left to be before December 25th, so we see that he was in Boston by then. So, I do not recall getting that either in the mail or in his person, so I'm not the person to answer that question.
Actually, all the temples originally in New York, before there was, these matchless gifts, but they refer to it as Radha Krishna Temple. And when we started the San Francisco chapter, we were told to make a sign, the Radha Krishna Temple. So we did that, not knowing exactly the meaning, and we asked Swamiji when he arrived, we put the sign up. There were no deities. We put the sign up, and we understood Krishna was God, that we wanted to know who was Radha. And he looked at us, young-filled young hippie boys and girls, and he said, Radha is Krishna's girlfriend. Something we could understand. And all the time, that Radha Krishna temple, that the fact that it was at very place also before, that was standard.
So we called the group the Radha Krishna Temple, because that's what we were.
And when we wanted to put the sign up in front of the very place temple, the Greater London Council was writing that you can't have a sign outside. That,
Is it during our year?
I think so, yeah. It's a blue sign.
Remember the plaque
Yeah, the plaque. And we want to put a new blue plaque there now. Bertrand Russell has one across the street. So why not have a plaque for Prabhupada on the side of that dentist stuff? And we went there the other day, sightseeing again. It was perfect. Radhanath Maharaj was with us. When we first went on Harinam to Conway Hall, we couldn't get in. There was a band rehearsing. They said we could go in the hall, but you can't make any noise. And then Mahavishnu Swami comes in with his cowbells and hat. So we had to stifle the Swami. how delightful he is. And so it was intermission, so we were able to walk right in there and sit in the balcony and take photographs in Conway Hall. Same thing in Betterton Street. We're there, and as we're there, the people, the proprietors, come there to go to work, and we had a half-hour conversation with them. And they were fascinated with the history. And then we go into Bury Place, and it's a dental office, and we're talking for half an hour with them. And so Maharaj says, this is a dental office, but it was transcendental. So you see how much fun Krishna consciousness can be. Any other questions?
A register, and you can still go and see that those register and Srila Prabhupada was written in. Actual ID, what we were doing there, and Srila Prabhupada was written in, the dates that he came, and
Isn't that nice? And can we have a copy of that? Make a copy of that sometime? And any other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. It's very impressive and fascinating how you can remember everything. 40 years now, how after installation of Radha Londonishvaras and Srila Prabhupada coming to London. So it's fascinating how you can remember, all of you, we can remember everything in details, what was going on and what's happening. How you can remember all that? I mean, for me, I'm very forgetful. So, 40 years of time. So.
Because Prabhupada is so powerful and Radha Londonishvaras enters your heart. Something learned hard is hard to forget. Something learned easy is easily forgotten. It's one of Prabhupada's great adages. So, because it's so meaningful, and I'm sure the others might have some answer, but for me, Prabhupada is so powerful in my heart that I don't forget these things he says after 40 years and things that have transpired. That's because it's so meaningful to us, as important in our lifetime. Maybe the others might have some insights. Yes,
I remember very little. Every night on Gurudas' book. Has most of you seen Gurudas' book? Gurudas has written the best book about Srila Prabhupada. He remembers very small, significant pastimes of Srila Prabhupada that tell huge stories. When I volunteered to help edit Gurudas' book, and when I first got it, it was a cardboard box about this big, filled with notes on the back of napkins, Gurudas' memory in little pieces. So, wonderfully spent nearly a year piecing together all the parts of Gurudas' remembrance of Srila Prabhupada in this wonderful book. So I hope if he's open to selling some, if anybody wants to buy one. Free plug for you.
No, I was sitting behind a door at Chowpatty trying to do it. He said, "Is this where you're trying to sell it?" He's always trying to make me a better salesperson. And I thank you for that. And for editing.
Thank you so much, because it's so useful for us. It's very grateful from your side to pass to our younger generation. Because unfortunately, so many Srila Prabhupada disciples we can see that they're getting ill, they're passing, and they're going.
Yamuna's got a book in works too, right?
That's more a prayer. I wrangled with that a lot. I had an interesting experience that practically from the very beginning I tried to record Prabhupada. So there was one big recorder in San Francisco, and then Gargamuni had one, and I had one. They were small tape recorders. And so even though in the history archives there are very few tapes of, say, 67 San Francisco, we didn't record enough, but I tried to record or write down, so I had notebooks. By the time I left London, I mean, I wrote almost every time I was mentioned Prabhupada, like twice already. And then when I left for India, Gurudas and I left all our belongings in trunks. And he left many, many photographs and his personal paraphernalia. By that time, I had to my name two trunks. And one was filled with Srila Prabhupada paraphernalia. There are many things in London he gave me personally, clothes. He gave the girls all clothes, socks from an airplane, or I got a sweater that he wore in Murray Place. I wore that on Nagar Kirtan in India. So many things. I had one trunk of notebooks. And then when I went to India, I continued doing those notebooks. And we all devised those of us that took notes, we all devised kind of a shorthand as fast as we could write, really small script I wrote. And then unfortunately when I left India in 1974 in October, I only left with my red beads and a notebook on deity worship. Prabhupada had sent me this various times when we were in Nagar Kirtan in India. So I took that and my red beads, and all my notebooks were left again in India. So when I went back to India, I said, does anybody know where there's some old trunks with things in them? And when I got there, all the trunks had been pilfered. So there was nothing left of my notebooks but one notebook. And that turned out to be a notebook from 1969 here in England in the fall at John Lennon. So I only have left a day-by-day journal of that stay at Tittenhurst. But I think writing down helped me a little bit in those times. It said if you want to learn something, try to repeat it at least 3 times. So I heard it and saw it, and then wrote it down, and then obviously read it many times. But I have such a terror, I laugh at myself as a buffalo memory. I can't remember anything. But what I do relish very much is associating with God brothers and God sisters and sitting together and putting together a tapestry of a moment in time with Srila Prabhupada. And I can do it with total strangers, or I mean, I've learned so much being here, just being able to be with Malati. I didn't have the association of the other 2 members here all through this yatra. But we've talked so much, and I learned so many things from her that I just didn't remember at all. So, and then down in Jaipur, I just relish so much his memory, because it's very, very full spectrum. He remembers not only the essence of something, or he has a role in it, but a broader picture. And I learned so much from that. So to delve into Prabhupada Katha is really a purifying thing to do, or even, obviously, we're here because of Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras. But we all remember different things. We, how present. That's why I said in the very, very beginning, if right now, all of you, I said be present in the moment, could you say who's in this room, and be people in the room, what was on the walls, what is Prabhupada's expression on his murti, how absorbed are you in the deities? We'd get a lot of different answers, right? So that's the way it was with Srila Prabhupada. But what a purifying thing to try to do. So I forgive you for certainly my years, because I just don't remember something. I can agree with Shyamasundara on that. But clarity is really important to me because Srila Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is. And so I'm really keen on preserving Srila Prabhupada as he was. It doesn't need to be changed. It was perfect. It was complete and perfect and glorious. Just, the more we can enter into that perfection, the more perfect we can be. Prabhupada said in deity worship, you're dealing with the supreme pure. Now to do that properly, you must become pure. So that's like my prayer in Prabhupada Katha. Narimu.
Thank you so much.
I started taping, so you may see the photographs with me with a tape recorder with Prabhupada a lot on morning walks. And when we were together in his room. And also those have been pilfered. I don't know where they are. I had a whole lot of tapes. So, I did this for our posterity, and I was storing them. And of course our memory is faulty. And so this was an individual act of someone, and we all suffered from that. We have to treat everybody's possessions and hearts with care and not pilfer them for our own use. And karmically, this came back later to someone because there was another trunk I had in the United States, and this one Prabhu valiantly tried to get the administrators to not do that, and they broke into the trunk, and Prabhupada's shoes were there, and they gold-plated them, put them on the altar. And about a year later, I visited that temple, and I said, by the way, those are not Prabhupada's shoes, they're mine. So thank you for putting them on the altar. And then someone asked, did they stay on the altar? I said, of course not. So be careful for what you wish for.
The question was basically, could you please give us some insight, because we've spoken so much and heard so much from you all about the appearance of Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras and their glorious festival, but we've actually spoken very little about the appearance of Lord Jagannath, Lord Balaram and Lady Subhadra, and how they appeared here in London. So could you please enlighten us on this, please?
Well, please forgive me. My memory is not very good about those single items. One of the very important things I'm seeing by having this 40th anniversary is it is bringing us all back together again, trying to remember bits and pieces that we've forgotten, that individually we've forgotten. When I look back 40 years later, people ask me who I am or where I came from. I say, well, in those days I was a Hare Krishna. I don't remember a lot of what happened in those days. But it must have been piecing the pieces together since we were here, because the record album came out in March of '69, something like that. Do you remember the date it came out? And
45?
all three, the 45.
Yeah, I think
about March. But the three deities are there, the three Jagannaths are in that photograph on the front. So prior to that, we lived in Betterton Street and then a succession of small flats, just Malati and I in different suburbs. So probably I carved Jagannath in Betterton Street, and then the others gradually after that.
I think last night, I didn't see it all, but up on the screen there was I think a picture of our Betterton altar. And did you see that? Did you register that? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. That might give some indication of what we had on our altar. If there were pictures, I know.
That's where we first explained to George about Jagannath.
We definitely, there's no doubt. We had small Jagannaths. Jagannath was a part of our life in the beginning of this yatra.
I heard as I was walking up the stairs, they were asking about where the wood came from and stuff. I think I went to. There was no other space, basically. Yeah. We put a shelf there.
And how did Srila Prabhupada expect us to do?
I don't know. I don't think we ever even asked questions like that. I know in San Francisco, for example, we thought we'd surprise Prabhupada with the altar. We didn't ask him about how to do it.
But he told us they should be up high.
Yeah.
And you put them so high that you had to get up on a ladder.
We used to go into Christian church.
And I had to climb the altar.
Yeah.
And this one time, Lord Shakti was on one side of Lord Balaram, and I was with Lord Jagannath, and I was reaching over to do Subhadra, and Lord Jagannath started to fall, and the whole thing went wobbly, and I grabbed his arms and fell, and the ladder went that way, dismissing Radha and Krishna, and I landed on my back, which should have been broken, with Lord Jagannath touching my face. All I could think of was what were Prabhupada going to say? And was I going to be sacked as a pujari? And was he hurt? And I could say, you're not hurt, Lord Jagannath, you're not hurt. I did not have one bruise on myself.
Haribol, look at how you sacrificed to save.
Radha and Krishna. And it was, we risked our lives every time.
But no, we were used to the Christian churches, where the cross of Jesus was way up there on the top.
Yeah, but they don't offer incense.
They built an altar and put them up high. So in this room in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, the ceilings were about 14 feet high. So we put them way up there, just on a shelf, and then later Prabhupada told us to put a little canopy over. You guys sewed up something, and then we thought about lights, so we went out and bought a bunch of red, yellow, and green spotlights and put them on these flashers so they would. And so all the hippies would walk by the storefront and look in and go, wow.
And the first Jagannath festival, Yamuna made the most beautiful gold canopies. They were somehow curved. And I was photographing, and somebody said, there seems to be a lot of photographs of Yamuna there. And I said, yes. These beautiful gold canopies.
It was the second Rath Yatra, and that's because Shyamasundara built it that way. Had to put the canopy where the wood was. It's interesting. Your question about that's a really interesting point, because when we installed Jagannath Subhadra Balaram on this day, and there was no room. Shyamasundara was right. There was absolutely no room but above, and the shelf was as low as it could go, and be clear Radha Londonishvaras size. And then Prabhupada had wanted this canopy, which was really a large umbrella that we upholstered to put, because it's a chhatra, is classical over an archavigraha. So because in India, of course, that's made with the most semi-precious stones and gold, and as elaborate as possible, and many different chhatras for different occasions. But of course, we were just starting from the bottom, so that was just enough room to clear that. And then, but I never, in that whole year, I think the second set of clothes was on March. I do remember some dates. It was Lord Advaita Acharya's appearance day. That was the second set of clothes, and the third set of clothes was for Radha Yatra. And those were the only 3 times we actually changed Lord Jagannath. Because at Prabhupada, interestingly enough, we didn't have the challenge that Buddharis do daily, because here in Radha Londonishvara, this is rather unique. I don't know. This has been talked about. It's the only place in the history of ISKCON that Prabhupada gave Pujari the instruction for mantra worship, mantrashna worship. So when I met the twins in Mayapur, Pujaris, they asked me about that, because nowhere else did Prabhupada do that. So because I can't give the whole purport of why. I never, like Malati, I never asked why he did it. We were certainly short-handed. There was only, we got very limited to do the cooking and the deity worship in this temple. So I bathed and dressed the deities according to Prabhupada's instruction for mantrashna bathing for the entire time. Never once did water go over Sri Sri Radha Londonishvara. And we didn't have small size Srila Radha Londonishvara, just like here today we watched a bathing of small size deities. Prabhupada said water should never touch their form after their bathing, which we saw last night. So that's a fascinating thing, that it was all done through mantrashna. Special. London is a very special place in the whole of ISKCON, to my knowledge. There was no other place Prabhupada gave that instruction.
Mataji, Gurudas, Prabhu, you mentioned that at that near disaster at the installation, you called Dhananjaya and Kumar Krishna Maharaj. Dhananjaya was all. And Yamuna, you were just mentioning there weren't many devotees to do the deity worship. So I'm intrigued. How many devotees were actually in the temple when the installation took place?
I've never counted them in my mind's eye, but we were about 20 strong in Tittenhurst, right? What did you say, 17 to 25, all total? So we moved from Tittenhurst, and then Srila Prabhupada moved into an apartment in Baker Street, above the Baker Tube stop, and almost all of us shifted to the temple for just sleeping hither and thither. So I would say there was under 25 Prabhu. But we weren't many with second initiation. So it was slowly coming second initiation. I spoke with Jai Hari last night about his history and when he got second initiation. So interestingly enough, I did a good deal of the offerings and the artis through that period that I was that we lived in the temple. Many a day. And I would actually go into the deity room to wake up the deities at about 3 a.m. and go through this process that Srila Prabhupada gave me to bathe and dress the Lord in night clothes and then into day clothes, and all in my mind. So it was a really long meditation in there.
you were making devotees while you were just doing Harinam, and people were joining you wherever you would go?
Many, very good.
By her cooking as well.
Yeah, and you also mentioned Kulashekar Prabhu went with you to get the wood for Lord Jagannath. Can you maybe have a little roll call? Can you recall some of the devotees' names?
Tirthapada, Kulashekar, Dikvijaya, Pritha, Vishaka number 1, Annapurna, Devadatta, Drupadi, Dhruva Maharaj. Who else?
Ananja.
Jai
Ramatanu.
Jai Hari.
Mukunda. Thank you.
Ramatanu, yes. Then some people came from the United States, correct?
Tamal and
Trivakram, Trivakram Brahmachari, and then Tribhuvannath came and joined in once.
Mahavishnu.
The person who had epilepsy, where the parents were trying to get him back on the roof, he left. One of the first people I could ever see.
Jayari reminded me of a story last night that he came from a Pakistani family in Birmingham. He was 16 years old when he came into the temple. He was initiated with Dhananjaya, I believe. Was he? Dhananjaya?
Well, we both got Radha initiation at the same time. That was on the actual day when Radha Londonishvaras were installed, on the 14th of December.
At any rate, at some point, they were all out on Sankirtan on Oxford Street, and his Jayari was only 16 or 17 at the time, Muslim family, and his uncle and family kidnapped him off the street and dragged him into a car and roared it back off to Birmingham. So Mukunda Maharaj went back up there that night, or a few nights later, in the middle of the night, he was telling me it was late, very late at night, and kidnapped him back. And he did it by calmly confronting the family head, who was the uncle, I believe, and sat down with him and explained Krishna consciousness and convinced him to let his nephew come back.
And we had the example from Prabhupada. I saw so many times parents objecting, this is common, and Prabhupada would charm them. And usually his simple query to the parents was, if your daughter or son is happy, why do you object? But the first time this happened was in San Francisco. At first there was no Vyasa song. Prabhupada sat on the altar with bongo drums. Finally, we had a Vyasa song. Prabhupada was on there, and Govinda Devi's parents come from Texas. And so the father goes right up to the Vyasa song, and he says to Prabhupada, "Why does my daughter have to have an engine name?" Well, at that point, we were starting to attract the community of East India, from India. And the whole Patel clan from Gujarat came. I remember the head of the clan had a gold tooth, and the lights would bounce off it. So they wanted to hear what Prabhupada, anything, what's Swamiji going to say. So they all go up to the Vyasa song too. So Govinda Dasi's father was looking around like this. He felt like General Custer surrounded by the... So Prabhupada, of course, the most intelligent, says, "You do not like Indians?" So Govinda Dasi's father says, "Yeah, I like Indians, all right. But why does my daughter have to have an Indian name?" So Prabhupada said, "If your daughter is happy, why do you object?" And at that point, Govinda Dasi's mother thought that was enough, and she led of Indadasi's father away. Prabhupada would do that. I see him charm Mahamsa's parents. I saw him charm so many. That with that simple query, this is your daughter, your son's life. If you want them to really be happy, you encourage it. My father was extremely happy because I was getting beat up and put in jail in the civil rights movement. And this was much tame. He actually liked Krishna consciousness. He would come on Harinam, and sometimes people would be attacking us. Yes, in New York. And they would be saying something derogatory. And he says, that's my son. Don't say that.
Two more devotees we forgot to mention were Ishan and Babavati.
Malati and Murari.
No, I thought you meant on the 14th.
And when did Jyotirmayi and Mandakini come?
Came in December, all three of them.
Also, on the 14th there was the whole Gupta family from Willesden. Viradakshai Vishnu and Pranadakshai Vishnu. Garbhodakshai Vishnu.
They got the whole yatra. They got the whole yatra in the film.
And the mother.
Sounds like we've got the whole universe.
Some of these names were a little later, that were actually in the temple. It's looking like 30 or under, but I don't think it's even 30 years.
Related, slightly unrelated question. One time I asked Satyaraj Prabhu, and he said that when he first saw Srila Prabhupada for the first time in person, that he had like a flash and he realized, this is my spiritual master. That something just like erupted inside him. Did any of you have that experience when you saw Srila Prabhupada, that something just kind of went off like an explosion in your heart or your mind?
I think each one of us would answer that differently. Maybe everyone could tell that story.
First time I saw him, coming out of the airplane, everybody had gone. Where's Swamiji? Of course, why should he stand up in the aisle and wait? He's too smart for that. So everybody comes out, where's Swamiji? Then he came. It was like Yudhishthira's chariot not touching the ground, his royal face pointing to the sky, golden in form. So I saw him. I had met Mayor Baba, I had met Swami Satchidananda, I met many Maharishi. I knew at that point, this is my spiritual teacher.
Very well. Pretty hard to distinguish one time from another. But almost every time I saw him, I got that flash. All the rest of my life, I still get that flash when I see him.
The first time we saw him, I saw him physically, and there were no pictures to see him otherwise, so I hadn't any conception other than in my mind what he might look like. And there was not so much knowledge about what a Swami was. Our equation with the Swami of his mind was that a mystical person who could perform mystical activities, some kind of maybe magic. So his first time in coming to San Francisco from New York, he flew on an airplane, and historically that was the first time he did fly on an airplane. So I remember waiting in the terminal in San Francisco, and I started thinking, we probably didn't even need to send him a ticket. He could have just come. Because I really had that conception that he would have these type of mystical potencies. Then we were waiting, and I remember watching the plane really carefully because I thought, well, we'll be able to tell where he is because we'll be in the glow nor around the window. And then the passengers came off, and then there was some flashing lights, and there were news people present with those big box cameras they used to carry with big flash bulbs. So I initially perceived the light was coming from the cameras, but then simultaneously somehow the lights happened and I somehow was knocked to the floor, just was on the floor without my actual, intention to be on the floor. There was, 2 or 3 others in the same condition who was looking. We hadn't been taught about obeisances, so it wasn't like I was making obeisances. And my vision was still distorted from the light. But then I was realizing the people with the cameras were also in the same position I was, meaning the cameras wouldn't be flashing in my face, they were flashing out. So just about that time when I was considering where was the light coming from, the light was passing in front of me and I was seeing through this light for the first time Srila Prabhupada's form. And he was walking, but again we have to say he was gliding because I'm still on the ground. So the first vision I had was actually of his lotus feet. And as I was looking up, my first impression was of his physical smallness, but then that got a little distorted because of his brightness. And this was happening kind of quickly. So he was small, he was bright, and then I just saw a little dog walking behind him, and which was our dog, little Ralph. And my mind kind of thought, the dog's smarter than you, he's up on his feet following him, so I just, I got up and I started to follow him. But that was, I was reflecting later, well, that was, following him was the right thing to do. But then, shortly thereafterwards, I had a dream where we were down. There's a big bridge that goes across the bay, the Golden Gate Bridge. And underneath the bridge, when the tide goes out, there's these mud flats. So I was standing down there at these mud flats, and then there would be these channels. And you had to be very careful. You could conceivably walk across to the other side, except for the fact that it's quick, there's some of it's quick mud, and you could be sucked in. So I was pondering how to get to the other side. And up through one of the channels that still had water came a little boat with Srila Prabhupada, and he invited me to get in the boat. And I got in the boat. And then that was my dream, and I told that to Srila Prabhupada. I asked him about that, and he said, yes, the spiritual master can appear in the dream. So that confirmed to me that this was my spiritual master.
So my answer is kind of a long one. I wasn't so fortunate as these 3 saintly souls. I met Srila Prabhupada at my sister's wedding in the fall of '66. And the first day I was there, he served prasadam. And that prasadam was just so potent. And the next day I helped him cook for the wedding. And I stayed there for a few days, and then Janki, Malati, Mukunda Janki and Gypsy Maurice and I drove across country and met Shyama and Malati. They were Sam and Melody, our friends we brought into San Francisco. And so when Srila Prabhupada came, but I thought, well, that's nice for those people, but that's not for me. It's a little strange what they're doing. So then we got to San Francisco, but I loved Swamiji. I liked him. I thought he was really, well, that's another story. He was amazing, but I wasn't, not initiation. So then Swamiji came, and then I met Gurudas right in that period. And then we became friends, and he had this, somehow we had some connection to go up to this place up on the coast. And I decided, well, while I'm there, I don't even think I've ever told this to Gurudas. While I'm there, I'm going to make a test and see if I like Krishna consciousness. I'm going to follow the 4 rules and regulations and chant Hare Krishna. Well, that wasn't what I'd been doing previously. So it was really within a very short time that I was just stunned by the Bhagavatam. And so I took the first read volume, and it just completely stunned me. I didn't understand all of it, but I just was electrified. By the time I got to chapter 17, punishments and rewards of Kali, my whole paradigm of everything had changed. And I was chanting like all day, just really a lot. And I tried to offer everything that I made. And so it was my little test. And finally I just had a flash that I think this is really what I want. I think I'm ready. So when we got back to San Francisco, I remember Mukunda and Janki, I wanted to see Swamiji right away. And he was sitting in his apartment, 3rd floor, bay window, rocking chair, long bead bag hanging off the end of it, rocking back and forth. And Janki's cat, Sputzelbrunzer, was sitting really close to Srila Prabhupada's feet. And so I came in and paid my obeisance. He said, so, what is the program? Like, right away. And I said, Swamiji, I want to go to the highest place. And he said, I can take you to I said, I want to go to the highest place. I'm thinking maybe the Himalayas. Because I had studied Buddhism, and I liked Buddhism a little bit. And Srila Prabhupada's answer was what did it for me, just totally. He said, I can take you to a higher place than the Himalayas. Just see, just see. Said those 4 words, just see, just see. And at that moment I knew that's what I needed to do with the rest of my life.
If you doesn't take too long, could you explain a little bit about the special worship that Prabhupada had you do for Radha Londonishvaras?
No. It's not for, this isn't the wrong time and place to do that. But if the pujaris are interested, I can talk to
them. From what I've read from Lamita and also Gurudas, I've read your book and some other books about the early days in San Francisco. And I was very much conscious that you were all very uninhibited, very much enthusiastic to just try things, just do things for Krishna. I think you, Shyamasundara, said, just whatever you like to do and then just do it for Krishna. You were very much bold and kind of brave and confident, very self-confident that you could try different things to serve Prabhupada. And when I've read these books, I've been kind of thinking, God, why can't I be like that? I'm so inhibited of whatever reason, this or that. I'm just not that kind of person. Really kind of kicking myself thinking, but I want to be. And so I just wondered if you have any advice how to come closer to that kind of consciousness.
You want a job?
I've got one. I want to do it better.
Prabhupada would say sometimes when somebody said, I like chanting Hare Krishna, but how can it save the people in the world? And Prabhupada said, you are so different from the people in the world. So you are so different from us? You're not. In fact, you remind me of Tri Bhuvanath a little bit. Your spirit, your willingness to serve, your jumping up and down, you're so bright and happy. You remind me of him. And so don't belittle yourself. You're not so different from us. You can do it. This is the whole point. Carry on. Carry on.
Somebody might have already asked this question, but this is obviously a big gathering, and lots of Prabhupada's disciples came to London at that moment. Did you try to set up any goals for the next year or for the next decade? And do you think it's possible to make a plan to make the movement flourish further?
Did we make up any plan?
Yeah, maybe he was discussing which way all we are going, and
I don't have any control of this here. That's up to the leadership of the yatra here. What goals they have, plans they have.
but in a way,
You mean what should we suggest something?
Yeah.
Oh. I would suggest you have so many famous and great personalities here that some devotees who feel bold in this manner begin to cultivate this type of preaching has not gone on much since our day, although some devotees are still doing it. Prabhupada taught us right from the beginning that to make a presentation to one great person was worth millions of others. But if you could convince one leader of society about Krishna consciousness, that millions will follow, or hundreds, many more will follow. So that program, I would suggest, has something to do in the future. And this is not something light. This person should be selected carefully, very carefully, and then some strategy should be planned how to approach this person. But there should never be a feeling of it can't be done. They're just people. If you use your intelligence and maybe combinedly approach some famous people, they will greatly promote Krishna consciousness if they accept it. This is what we did. This was our procedure at the beginning, and it should be carried on. It was Prabhupada's system. We went to. He loved it when members of the leaders of society came to talk with him. Theologians, philosophers, anybody who leads people Prabhupada was more happy to speak with those people than anyone. He constantly. We had a plan to keep him here as long as possible in London with us. And the only way we could do that was to have, Prabhupada, you can't leave now. So-and-so is coming next week, and then after that, the Archbishop will be here. You can't leave. Oh, okay, I'll stay. He purposely loved it more than anything to speak to those people, leaders of society. So if you mount a program to do that individually, if you feel the urge to do it, and the commitment, it takes a full life commitment to track after one special person. You can't do it lightly. It has to be planned very carefully, and then you have to make it your service to do it. Or to it without fear. Krishna. That way you get to see Krishna personally. That was Prabhupada's great gift to us. That by doing this, we got to see Krishna personally, interfering to make sure that our service was fulfilled. Going after something so big.
Can I say something? A small thing to add to what you said. I just read something this morning in the Purport to Shyamasundara that gives, it's fancy as Shyamasundara was saying to you. Sometimes I like to write down some little meditation for the day. So it's in Adi Leela Prabhupada has said some things, but he winds up, therefore it is a principle that a preacher must strictly follow the rules and regulations laid down in the Shastra, yet at the same time devising means where the preaching work to redeem the fallen may go on in full force. So, nice guiding meditation to creative and innovative preaching, to remain strictly following the regulative principles, and at the same time devise your creative preaching. And this will greatly assist your mission of collecting fallen souls.
And one of the reasons George liked it so much is because we treated him as a real person. When you're doing this, you see inside the person. We didn't ask him for anything, we just gave him things. And these people have plenty of people who will be yes people to them. Yes, you're great. But if you really treat them as a friend and as a person, they like this because they don't have to keep their false persona. It's a disservice to not treat them as a real person, and it's a service to treat them as a person. There's one question handed to me, and I'll read it. Dear Gurudas, I'm following your nice memories. A question, why has Tamal Krishna Maharaj being referred to as Tommy Gun from one of Tamal Krishna's disciples? And it's a good question. Yamuna and I used to invite Tamal Krishna to dinner, and he was one of the few devotees that would stay to the end of the tape we would play to him. We saw great resolution. And personally, I'm very fond of Tamal Krishna Goswami. We took him under our wing and he flowered. But I remember we went back to Morning Star Ranch where he used to live with Vishnujana in the tree. And when we went there, he was saying, I came here first with 2 women and a pocket full of money, and now I'm returning to you with nothing. But he went to the head of the place and said, I'm doing Bhakti Yoga. And the head of the place started playing Bach. So I saw in Tamal Krishna a very, very strong devotee. And sometimes he would talk with great force, especially if he was trying to convince somebody of something. So this is an endearing name to my friend Tamal Krishna Goswami, because as a devotee he was like a Tommy gun when he tried to convince somebody. It was pat, 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 pat. So please do not misunderstand that I was trying to denigrate him in any way. What I think.
Going to speak, so fortunate. We have your association this evening here, and myself is much more fortunate for me. I just wanted to ask, have any of you been to the last moments of Prabhupada's disappearance? And if so, was there any message given to you?
I was on assignment in Lebanon.
I just wanted to say that along the lines of what you were talking about, devotees preaching in a way that is reaching out to influential and important people, that today is the Vyasa Puja day of His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. Also was a great preacher like that. So it's not connected. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to make the devotees aware of that special day also. Today is on the Vedic calendar, it says Vyasa Puja Day. At least it's being celebrated that way in the States, so that's some difference.
Mataji, Argo, I have a question. Are there any tales or snippets about cooking the Boga offerings for Radha Londonishvara, and you're a famous cook. Are there any cooking tales or anything to do with Radha Londonishvara, Jagannath and everything? The book?
The tales?
Sorry?
I see. What the question is, are there cooking tales?
I wondered if there were any little incidents cooking for the deities that you could enlighten us about.
I could answer that question for quite a while, but I did touch that subject matter obliquely a couple nights ago, where I spoke a little bit about 5 incidences that were directly related to Radha Londonishvara's history in that short period of time I was there, and cooking with Srila Prabhupada. It was, I will say my experience cooking for Srila Prabhupada was like a lifetime, an evolution of going from first grade to finished through primary school, and then secondary school, and then on to higher education. In other words, every year that I was in Srila Prabhupada's association that I practiced Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada revealed different things about cooking. So the period here in London, I was really a young devotee. We were all very young devotees. We were initiated in 1967. We came here in August of 68. So we were a year and a half old when Prabhupada sent us here. So all of you know what your first year and a half in Krishna consciousness was like. When we left here at Ramdabot, we were here about 2 years, the 6 of us together. And I was a very, very young devotee, and knew all we knew about Krishna consciousness was directly from Prabhupada. There was no other teachers, there were no other examples. I will say that when he did come in 69, and Malati and Janki and I were primarily engaged in his service cooking, that sometimes he would comment and say, "Where did you learn this?" I remember him saying, and I said to him, "Well, I learned it from you, because I thought everything I know is from you." And he said, "No, I asked you, where did you learn this? You didn't learn this from me." So then I'd have to look back, well, I learned that from such and such family, or this and this family. So I began to realize that I was already trying to broaden my scope of service to Srila Prabhupada. He said once at John Lennon's, when I served a lunch plate to him, he said, Srila Prabhupada was extremely perceptive on so many levels, spoken and unspoken. And each one of us had a different relationship with him, realizing that. Isn't it so? I mean, there's no doubt of that. So sometimes you could tell Prabhupada communicated with you, not being esoteric, but with his eyes, or he could give an instruction. And if you were in his service and you were really dedicated to that service, you could understand what he meant. So I put down a plate, and Prabhupada simply looked at it. And when he looked at it, I knew he tasted things. And so even before he put a bite in his mouth, he said, "This is so nice." He said, "I thought when I came to the West, I was prepared to live on potatoes and what is this thing, double roti?" So that meant bread. Double roti in those days, I don't know if it still means that, but it means puffy bread or something with yeast. So he said, "I was prepared to live on potato and double roti to serve the instruction of my Guru Maharaj." He said, "But now you're learning so nicely, and this is when we're brand new cooks, only very young in devotional service." But in that way, he encouraged us. He was the supreme encourager. Srila, I think that if I think of myself in relation to cooking, or if you see yourself in relationship to those that you value the most in devotional service, there are people that generously encourage you and see whatever strengths you have. So Srila Prabhupada was so brilliant at this, at understanding our minds and our needs, And whether you just look at his letters and see how he wrote so much encouragement, give some very big challenging thing to do, and then more or less say you can do this. So in that way, I think that spirit of creativity came, that we have no idea what we were doing, but let's do something, right? And just come up with it. And that was all because of Srila Prabhupada's encouragement. We didn't come here great personalities at the age of 26. And that's what all of us were younger. So I think encouragement and that one period in London, what I found out, if I reflect back on Prabhupada's teaching with me, anyway, my relationship with him, is that he would give some instruction, and until I got that instruction, he'd repeat it. And then when I got it, he'd move on to something else. So that was definitely that way in cooking. It's a little hint. I mean, it's a long subject matter.
If there's going to be louder than that, give me a big round of applause.
So now we're coming to concluding parts of our week-long festival. It feels a shame, it feels sad. So a couple of things are going to happen now. First, our Temple President, Janitai Prabhu, is going to give some final remarks, and then His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj is going to close the official week-long celebrations with some few words. And then we're going to have Gauravani Prabhu and his Bhajaners did Kirtan, and Vishram Prabhu. And Saha Fashion, it's already started out there in the street that you can hear. So we'll bring it here. So without further ado, have Janitai Prabhu come and speak.
Hare Krishna, everyone. So, I just wanted to quickly reveal the reason that we tried to put this festival together, and it was really because I wanted to get the association of all of these devotees. I thought that, I don't know if I'll be here next year or the 45th anniversary or even tomorrow really, and I thought that since we're probably going to be here for the 40th, then we should try to do something really wonderful, and in the process, being very self-centered, I thought I'll probably get a lot of mercy. And now as it's closing, because it was a very big build-up, over a year and a half of thinking, planning, and organizing. Actually, I can't believe it's finishing. It's like that, isn't it? So, but I guess what's the saying? All good things must end, come to pass. So I would like to thank all four of you for coming and giving such a wonderful and inspirational association. I think the only word that I can think to describe it is transformational. It feels like this little temple in the city has really developed the family atmosphere again. That maybe has been lacking. Maybe was there a little bit, but it's like the aunts and uncles and the moms and dads are back. It's really nice. And I think that extends to so many who came to take your association and to take the association of each other and to relish the nectarian service and association of Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras. So it's my hope that we can follow in your footsteps and be adventurous and not rest on our laurels and try to push this Krishna consciousness forward in a very bold and dynamic way, and actually try to have the impact in the most important city in the world, with the most beautiful deities in the world, for the pleasure of the Param Guru and most amazing spiritual master in the world. So please, if you see fit, bless us, and maybe all of us who are here after you depart can begin to work together very cooperatively to really push things forward. So, yeah, we'd like to give you some small tokens of appreciation, I guess you could say in one sense, small. This is some Mahaprasad from Radha Londonishvaras. Also the garlands during the Abhishek to present, and also a copy of the offerings book that we had printed for Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras.
Thank you so much. Tomorrow, by Krishna's grace, I'm going to see a temple president that served here for a long, long time, who has Lou Gehrig's disease, and his name is Vichy Treveria. I'm going to bring these sweets to Vichy.
So with that, I'd like to do two things. I'd like to conclude, and I'd like to ask everyone to please join me in expressing our gratitude and appreciation by chanting very, very loudly 3 Hari Bol. Now I'd like to request His Holiness Radha Swami, you could sit with you, to please come and if he could close this ceremony for us.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Vastatraveshatarine Vanshakalpadurvyascha Kripasindhuvyaevacha Patikanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Asa Sabi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When these 6 devotees first came to London, what did they have? To ponder this question is quite educational in the science of bhakti. They hardly knew the philosophy. They were only devotees at the most a year and a half. They came here after taking the blessings of Srila Prabhupada with very innocent and humble hearts. They did not think that they were great devotees, but they knew that Prabhupada was a great devotee. Sometimes what we acquire in Krishna consciousness can become an impediment because we become proud. We think that I am the doer. I'm a great kirtan singer. I'm a great manager. I'm a great preacher. I'm a great philosopher. They couldn't have done any of those things. But they knew that they were here as instruments of Prabhupada's mercy. They were completely depending on Srila Prabhupada's blessings to empower them. And in their innocence, they had no precedent either of how to spread Krishna consciousness in a foreign land from their own country. But they wanted to please their spiritual master. And they were fully conscious that whatever they could accomplish was not due to them. It was because of Krishna and Prabhupada's mercy. And on this basis, they were fearless. They knew that Prabhupada was behind them and that they could do anything. And they did it. When we hear their stories, they were childlike in the way what the most powerful sannyasis could not do in London. And please understand, these sannyasis were very, very highly trained in the philosophy. They were stalwart renunciates. They were advanced Vaishnavas. Of course, it was a different time. But 6 hippies from America who were only devotees for 1 year, who only had 1 book, the 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam. They could establish a temple, deities, #1 record albums, and the whole country knew about them. They were living in the house of the most famous man on earth, and they made one of them the devotee. And they were bringing the most prominent people of the UK to meet Prabhupada. How did that happen? And why it's hardly happened since. however learned, however skillful we are in Krishna consciousness, we can take 1,000,000 seminars. We can be great musicians. We can be erudite Sanskrit scholars and philosophers. We can be magnificent managers. But what empowers us is this innocent humility that was in their heart. That I'm an instrument of a higher power. And the ego of our own abilities does not block the flow of that mercy from coming through us. Prabhupada wanted us to study his books. He wanted us to be expert at whatever we were doing according to our capacity. It is this quality that actually enables us to allow a flow of mercy beyond our own intelligence or skills to attract and deliver people's hearts. This last week of hearing from these wonderful devotees is the lesson in the essence of Krishna consciousness. To be instruments of that power of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna, of Srila Prabhupada and our parampara. Just to be instruments. Just to try to please them. These 6 devotees did not want to become great preachers. They just wanted to please their spiritual master. That's all. And because they had no other desire, look what Krishna and Prabhupada did through them. And this principle that we're speaking about is the eternal principle of bhakti. People have been asking, what should we do in the next 40 years? In the next 400 years? In the next 4,000 years? The principle is the same. To capture that spirit. And with whatever we gather and accumulate, to enhance our devotional service, the foundation is that spirit of just being humble instruments trying to please the spiritual master without ego. And because Srila Prabhupada was so much the center of their lives, they're very, very different personalities. But they work together so beautifully for the higher principle. To whatever extent Krishna and Sri Radharani allows me to know these exalted, very senior godbrothers and godsisters of mine, they're really different people. Yamuna Prabhu and Malati Prabhu. Just analyze the two. I won't go into details, but they're completely different. One is very organized, very systematic, very eloquent, and the other is just extremely spontaneous, and sometimes apparently wild. Shyamasundara Prabhu is mining projects and carpentry, and very practical, very, very practical. Carpenter, and he knows how to do all those things. And Gurudas Prabhu, I don't think he knows how to do anything. He knows how to talk. And Janaki Prabhu and Mukunda Maharaj. But yet, they were united completely because they were focused on pleasing Srila Prabhupada and bringing his mercy to the fallen souls. And they really cared. On behalf of Srila Prabhupada, they really cared about people. So this principle of uniting, being united on the platform of the higher principle of pleasing Guru and Krishna attracts the power of Krishna to perform miracles. What they did here was nothing less than a miracle. I mean, we have seen people in the Himalayas making ashes and making gold and reading minds, but what's such a big thing about that? How does that help people? But 6 people just born and raised in America who never even heard of Krishna or Radharani, who never even saw a Sanskrit letter before. They were sent to a foreign land after 1 year of coming in contact with the Hare Krishna mantra to establish a whole mission. Generally, other religions, they train their missionaries for years before sending them to another land. They came here. It was a miracle. It's the miracle of Prabhupada's desire. When Srila Prabhupada was on Jaladuta and he had those heart attacks and seasickness, he had 40 rupees, which amounted to 0 in America. He couldn't exchange rupees. He had nothing. He didn't know anybody. Why did he come? Now, we may be compassionate to our children or our family members or our friends, but he was risking his life, sacrificing everything for people he never met and he never knew. But he loved every living entity because they were part of Krishna. And he, Paradugaduki, he was suffering to see any living entity apart from Krishna. That's the ecstasy of compassion. Selfless devotion. And they recognized, because they received that unconditional love from Srila Prabhupada. And they made it their life and soul. Can you imagine? In the middle of the winter, in London, living in a cardboard box with a baby girl? That was Malati baby girl. They had no money, nothing. It was a miracle. And as far as I could see, it was because they were touched by Prabhupada's love and they simply wanted to share it. That is bhakti. Last night, when the 4 of them were chanting on the stage, seeing it was one of the highlights of my life. How many of you were there? It was the crescendo of this festival. They were together. They rehearsed it. I watched them once rehearse I can say that watching them rehearse this kirtan was really boring. They were trying to get the melodies the same. They're all different. They all have different pitches in which they sing. Like Gauravani Prabhu and myself, when we were trying to sing. But Yamuna Prabhu would sing one pitch, and then Shyamasundara would another, and then Malati was a whole nother one. But they were somehow they got it really nice. But when they went up on the stage last night, whatever they practiced, they executed. But there was a spontaneous feeling. They were receiving the energy of all of us. They were being empowered, as far as I could see, by the gratitude of all the devotees. And recognizing the gratitude of those devotees really humbled them and manifested Prabhupada's empowerment within their heart. When they were chanting, it may not have been the most melodious. If it was just Yamuna Devi herself, it would have been the most melodious. But the four of them, it was not so melodious. But I believe, please say Haribol if you agree, I believe it reached our hearts more than any melodious kirtan we've ever because of their spontaneous appreciation for each other, their spontaneous gratitude to everyone who was in the audience, for all, especially all of their god brothers and god sisters who had given so much of their lives to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. They were in ecstasy, were they not? It's not something you could rehearse. It was their love. It was really a high moment. It was absolutely beautiful. Everyone just leapt to their feet, despite all those chairs and tables. It was the intimate expression of unity and diversity based on serving Sri Guru and Sri Radha and Krishna. They're elderly people. They're all approaching 70. The age that Prabhupada came to America, they're all approaching that age now, 40 years later. And with great efforts, they came here. In the same way that they have expressed our gratitude, or their gratitude to Srila Prabhupada and to us, it's a principle of bhakti to always be grateful to our elders. Their natural humility is, they said, we established it and then we left and everybody else did the rest. All of you deserve the credit. Certainly everyone who came after them deserves all credit as well. But what empowered the people who came after them is that they were following in their footsteps. These 6 devotees set the standard of unconditional loving service to Srila Prabhupada, to the Vaishnavas, to Sri Sri Radha Londonishvaras. And that was the precedent that everyone could follow. That adventurous, creative, innocent, fearless desire to just preach, to just get Prabhupada's mercy is foundational. And Prabhupada saw that. And he had them establish that foundation in San Francisco, and then establish that foundation in London, and then establish that foundation all over India. And wherever they went, see what the results. So yeah, has, to be grateful to those who came before us, who cleared the way. Our ultimate gratitude is to Srila Prabhupada, what he has done. What was his example? What sacrifices he made to clear the way for bhakti in the West? And those original disciples who underwent great hardships joyfully because they were touched by Prabhupada's inspiration and his way. The future of this yatra and all yatras is very much dependent on accessing Sri Sri Radha Londonishvara's mercy. And we cannot really get that mercy unless we are grateful to those who made sacrifices to make our Krishna consciousness possible. In London, it began with Prabhupada and them, and all those who followed them. A grateful heart is a heart in which there is a fertile field for the seed of bhakti to grow. So let us offer our sincerest gratitude to Yamuna Prabhu, Malati Prabhu, Shyamasundara Prabhu, Gurudas Prabhu, and all the other Prabhupada disciples and all the other devotees who are in the past and in the present giving their hearts and souls to Prabhupada's mission. Loudly chanting Hari Bol. And our sincerest gratitude to the devotees here in London who have organized this festival. Sleepless nights. They've been working on this for months and months and months. To make all the devotees happy. Thank all of you. Let us take this spirit and move forward with that innocent, childlike humility to just be instruments of divine mercy and be instruments of the miracle of bhakti. Thank you very much.